What begins as a beautiful celebration of love quickly spirals into chaos when a racist gang crashes the wedding, determined to spread hatred. But they make a fatal mistake, underestimating the groom, a highly trained Navy SEAL. As tensions explode, love, resilience, and unshakable courage shine through, proving that hate stands no chance against the power of unity and strength. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jasmine Carter's cozy apartment, casting a golden glow over her wedding gown, hanging delicately in the corner. Jasmine, 31, a successful entrepreneur whose name was synonymous with perseverance, adjusted her veil in the mirror. Her deep brown eyes sparkled with excitement, her radiant smile hiding the hurdles she had overcome to reach this moment. Jasmine had built her event planning business from scratch, defying naysayers who doubted her ambition. She had become a role model for young Black women in her community, teaching them to dream big and never back down. Her fiancé, Ryan Blake, had been her steadfast supporter from the beginning. Quiet, but exuding quiet strength, Ryan was a decorated Navy SEAL, his presence a grounding force in Jasmine's whirlwind world. Today was the culmination of their love story, a story forged through challenges, shared dreams, and an unshakable bond. Ryan had proposed on a quiet evening under the stars, promising Jasmine that no storm could ever extinguish their love. Jasmine's heart swelled as she thought about him standing at the altar, waiting to become her husband. But the community where Jasmine had grown her dreams wasn't without its shadows. Trouble often came in the form of Mick Tanner, a burly, hate-filled man who led a local gang notorious for their intimidation tactics. Jasmine's last encounter with Mick had been at a neighborhood town hall where she'd stood up to his threats against a community center project. Mick had scowled, his words dripping with disdain as he muttered, "You'll regret this." Jasmine had shrugged it off at the time, but Mick's glare lingered in her mind. Now, as she slipped into her dress and her bridal party buzzed with excitement, an unease she couldn't quite place settled in the back of her mind. The thought of walking down the aisle toward Ryan calmed her nerves, but the shadows of her past encounters with Mick cast faint clouds over the sunny day ahead. Outside, in the heart of their vibrant neighborhood, the wedding venue stood ready, an open garden adorned with elegant white roses and soft fairy lights. Friends and family arrived with smiles and laughter, their joy a testament to the love Jasmine and Ryan had cultivated. Yet, unseen by the guests, Mick and his gang lurked nearby, watching from a distance. Mick's face twisted into a sneer as he muttered to his companions, "Let's see how perfect their day really is." As Jasmine's father entered the room to escort her to the ceremony, her heart raced, not from fear, but from the overwhelming emotion of the journey that had brought her here. Unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon, she took a deep breath and smiled. Today was her day. No one could take that from her. Or so she thought. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the sprawling garden venue. Rows of white chairs lined the aisle, flanked by vibrant floral arrangements of lavender and ivory roses. The gentle hum of soft music from a string quartet blended with the laughter of friends and family, all gathered to celebrate a love that had endured and flourished against the odds. Jasmine Carter stood at the edge of the garden, framed by a wooden arch entwined with fresh greenery. Her gown, a flowing masterpiece of lace and silk, sparkled subtly in the sunlight. Her natural curls were pinned into an elegant updo, adorned with a delicate pearl comb. Her smile radiated joy, her expressive brown eyes reflecting the emotions of the moment. Across the aisle, Ryan Blake stood tall in his ceremonial Navy SEAL dress blues, his commanding presence grounding the scene in a quiet strength. His uniform, perfectly pressed and accented with gleaming metals, was a symbol of his dedication and discipline. But today, his gaze softened as it rested on Jasmine, his love for her evident in every expression. As the ceremony began, the couple's vows wove a tapestry of commitment, love, and resilience. Their voices, steady yet full of emotion, echoed through the garden. Guests wiped tears from their eyes, and Jasmine's mother clutched her chest, overcome with pride and happiness. Unbeknownst to the joyous crowd, danger lurked just beyond the venue's periphery. Behind a line of thick oak trees, Mick Tanner and his gang watched the scene unfold with seething resentment. Mick, his burly frame clothed in a tattered leather jacket, clenched his fists as he glared at the scene. His gang, a ragtag group of sneering men, whispered among themselves, their expressions dark and malevolent. Mick spat on the ground, his voice a venomous growl. Look at 'em, acting like they own the place. It's time someone taught them a lesson. One of his men, a wiry figure with a scar running across his cheek, grinned maliciously. What's the plan, Mick? Mick's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. We crash their little fairy tale, make sure they know who's really in charge around here. The group moved with quiet precision, their boots crunching softly against the forest floor. In their hands, they carried a mix of weapons, chains, bats, and even a crowbar, ready to wreak havoc. Back at the ceremony, Ryan's sharp instincts stirred uneasily. A faint prickle ran down his spine, a familiar sensation honed over years of covert missions and high-stakes encounters. His piercing blue eyes scanned the edges of the venue, lingering on the tree line where shadows shifted unnaturally. Something's off, Ryan murmured under his breath, his jaw tightening. But as his gaze returned to Jasmine, standing radiant and serene at the altar, he forced himself to push the unease aside. This was their moment, and he wouldn't let anything ruin it. The officiant's voice carried over the garden. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ryan, you may kiss your bride. The crowd erupted into applause as Ryan took Jasmine's face gently in his hands and kissed her, a tender yet powerful affirmation of their union. Jasmine's smile was brighter than ever as they turned to face their cheering guests, hand in hand. Behind the trees, Mick gritted his teeth, his face twisting in disgust at the sight of their joy. Time to move, he hissed. The gang began their approach, creeping closer to the edges of the gathering. Mick's hand tightened around the crowbar, his mind racing with plans to shatter the peace. But as they moved into position, a low rustling in the bushes caught Ryan's attention. His eyes flicked toward the sound, narrowing as he spotted the faint glint of metal in the distance. The instincts he had buried moments earlier came roaring back, and his body tensed like a coiled spring. Leaning toward Jasmine, he whispered, "Stay close to me. Something's wrong." Jasmine frowned, her brows knitting together as she searched his face. "What is it?" Ryan didn't answer. His gaze locked onto the approaching figures, now visible as they stepped into the sunlight. Mick and his gang walked with arrogant swagger, their menacing expressions a stark contrast to the joy surrounding them. The crowd's laughter and chatter began to quiet as guests turned to see the unwelcome intruders. A ripple of unease spread through the gathering, and Jasmine's grip on Ryan's hand tightened. Ryan's voice was calm but firm as he addressed the crowd. "Everyone, stay where you are." He stepped forward, his imposing presence cutting through the tension like a blade. Mick smirked, his eyes filled with contempt as he met Ryan's gaze. Well, well, the hero of the day. Looks like we came just in time for the party." Ryan's voice was cold as steel. "You've made a mistake coming here, Tanner." Mick chuckled darkly, gesturing to his gang. "We'll see about that." The tension was palpable, the idyllic setting of the wedding now a powder keg of suspense. Ryan's calm composure belied the storm brewing within him. He had faced worse enemies than Mick, but this time, it was personal. As Jasmine stood behind him, her heart pounding, she knew one thing for certain. Ryan wasn't just her husband. He was her protector, and she trusted him to defend the love they had built, no matter the cost. The sound of soft classical music played in harmony with the gentle rustle of the breeze. Jasmine Carter began her walk down the aisle, her steps measured and graceful, a vision of elegance in her flowing white gown. Each step felt like a culmination of all the challenges she and Ryan Blake had faced together, a journey of love, resilience, and unity. The guests rose, smiling and teary-eyed as they turned to watch her. Jasmine's father, proud and emotional, held her arm tightly, walking her toward the man who had been her anchor. Ryan stood at the altar, his piercing blue eyes fixed on her, his expression calm and tender. But just as Jasmine reached the halfway point, a sudden commotion at the edge of the venue shattered the moment. Mick Tanner and his gang of 6 stormed into the garden, their boots crunching loudly on the gravel path. Dressed in rough jeans and worn leather jackets, they exuded a mix of arrogance and menace. The guests gasped, a ripple of fear spreading through the crowd as the gang's shouts cut through the once serene atmosphere. "Look at this circus," Mick bellowed, his voice dripping with contempt. Who gave you people the right to take over our town? His gang members joined in, hurling slurs and taunts, their eyes scanning the crowd with open hostility. Mick's face twisted in a sneer as he locked eyes with Jasmine, his hatred palpable. The guests froze, their earlier joy replaced by a paralyzing fear. Jasmine's steps faltered, her father instinctively pulling her closer. Mick pointed a finger at Jasmine. Thought you could just waltz in here with your fancy dress and make-believe world, huh? You don't belong here. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to look away. Her voice, steady but laced with defiance, rang out. This is our day. You don't get to ruin it. Mick's sneer deepened as he stepped closer, his gang trailing behind him like vultures. Ruin it? He repeated mockingly. Oh, sweetheart, I'm just getting started. Before Jasmine could respond, Ryan moved. He stepped forward with a quiet authority, positioning himself between her and Mick. His calm demeanor, though unassuming, carried an undeniable weight. That's enough, Ryan said, his voice firm but level. You've made your point. Now leave before you make this worse for yourselves. Mick's gang erupted in laughter. One of them, a wiry man with tattoos snaking up his neck, jeered, What are you gonna do? Call the cops? We own this town. Mick leaned in closer, sizing Ryan up. And who are you supposed to be? Some knight in shining armor? He smirked. You're outnumbered, pal. Best step aside before you get hurt. Ryan's expression didn't waver. I'll give you one last chance to walk away. Trust me, you don't want to find out what happens if you don't. Mick's smirk turned into a scowl. Big talk for a nobody. A gang member, emboldened by Mick's bravado, pulled a knife from his pocket, brandishing it threateningly. The guests screamed and scrambled for cover, chairs overturning in the chaos. It was the last mistake he'd make. In a flash, Ryan's calm facade evaporated, replaced by razor-sharp focus. Moving faster than the eye could follow, he closed the distance between himself and the armed man, disarming him with a fluid twist of the wrist. The knife clattered to the ground as Ryan drove his knee into the man's stomach, sending him sprawling. Another gang member lunged at Ryan with a chain, but Ryan anticipated the move, sidestepping effortlessly and delivering a calculated strike to his attacker's shoulder, causing him to drop the weapon with a cry of pain. Mick stood frozen for a moment, his bravado shaken as he watched Ryan dispatch his men with surgical precision. Jasmine, now standing safely to the side with her father shielding her, couldn't tear her eyes away from Ryan. She had always known he was capable, but seeing him in action was something else entirely. You've got to be kidding me, Mick muttered, his voice betraying a flicker of doubt. Ryan turned his attention to Mick, his expression unreadable. Still want to test me? Mick hesitated, his confidence crumbling under the weight of Ryan's quiet dominance. His remaining gang members looked equally uncertain, glancing at each other as if questioning their allegiance. The silence was broken by the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. One of the guests, hiding behind an overturned table, had called the police. Mick's face twisted in anger. This isn't over, he spat, glaring at Ryan before signaling his gang to retreat. You'll regret this. Ryan didn't respond, his unwavering gaze following them until they disappeared from view. As the tension began to ease, the guests slowly emerged from their hiding places. A mixture of relief and awe spread through the crowd as they processed what had just happened. Ryan turned back to Jasmine, his calm demeanor returning as he extended a hand to her. You okay? He asked softly. Jasmine nodded, her voice steady despite the lingering adrenaline. I'm fine, thanks to you. Her father patted Ryan on the shoulder, his gratitude evident. Son, I don't know what we would have done without you. Ryan gave a small smile. Just doing what needed to be done. The officiant, still clutching his clipboard, cleared his throat nervously. Shall we continue? Jasmine looked at Ryan, her gaze full of love and admiration. Yes, she said firmly. We're not letting them take this moment from us. As the ceremony resumed, the guests applauded, their earlier fear replaced by a renewed sense of unity and hope. Ryan stood tall at the altar, ready to claim the future he and Jasmine had fought so hard to build. The gang's retreat didn't last long. Mick Tanner, seething with rage and humiliation, regrouped with his remaining men behind the venue's tree line. "We're not done here," Mick hissed, his face twisted with fury. "We'll show them who runs this town." Back at the ceremony, Ryan Blake's calm exterior belied the storm brewing within. His military instincts kicked in as he surveyed the surroundings, his sharp eyes noting the gang's movements in the distance. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught him to assess threats and act swiftly. And now those skills were about to be put to the ultimate test. Not on foreign soil, but in his own backyard. Ryan turned to Jasmine, who was already comforting the guests. Her composure under pressure inspired him, as it always had. "Jazz," he said softly but firmly, "I need you to keep everyone safe. Stay inside the tent and don't let anyone leave." Jasmine nodded, her eyes searching his for reassurance. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. Ryan's mind shifted into tactical mode. He moved silently toward the edge of the venue, his polished dress blues now slightly disheveled, but his movements precise and purposeful. As Ryan crept closer to the gang's position, memories of his SEAL missions flooded back. He recalled stalking through dense jungles, neutralizing insurgents in hostile territories, and rescuing hostages under impossible odds. Those moments had demanded absolute focus, a mindset he now summoned to protect his future. The first gang member didn't see him coming. Ryan used the element of surprise, pinning the man to the ground with a swift hold. "You don't want to do this," Ryan said, his tone low and menacing. "Walk away now." The man, terrified by the steel in Ryan's voice, nodded and scrambled off into the woods. One down, Ryan thought. Back at the venue, Jasmine had taken control. She ushered guests into the reception tent, instructing them to remain calm and quiet. "We stick together," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the nervous murmurs. "Ryan's got this. Trust him." Her leadership steadied the crowd, many of whom were shaken but reassured by her strength. Jasmine's father, a retired firefighter, stepped up beside her. "You've got your mother's fire," he said with pride. Jasmine smiled briefly, then turned her attention back to the guests. Her determination was unwavering. "No one ruins this day for us," she muttered under her breath. Meanwhile, Ryan systematically dismantled the gang's strategy. He disabled their vehicles by slashing tires and removing spark plugs, ensuring they couldn't make a quick getaway. His movements were silent and calculated, each step methodical. Mick grew increasingly agitated as his men reported back with excuses and failures. "What the hell is going on?" he barked, his confidence starting to crumble. Another gang member tried to take Ryan by surprise, charging at him with a baseball bat. Ryan sidestepped the attack effortlessly, disarming the man with a swift kick and rendering him incapacitated with a well-placed strike. "You should have stayed home," Ryan muttered as the man groaned on the ground. As Mick's numbers dwindled, his frustration boiled over. He grabbed a metal pipe from the back of his truck and stormed toward the venue. "Enough of this!" he yelled, his voice echoing through the trees. Ryan emerged from the shadows, his presence stopping Mick in his tracks. "You're done, Mick," Ryan said, his tone icy. "Walk away before this gets worse." But Mick's pride wouldn't let him back down. "You think you're a hero, huh? You think you can come into my town and play the big man?" Ryan stepped closer, his eyes locked on Mick. "It's not your town, and you're not in charge anymore." Mick lunged at Ryan, swinging the pipe wildly. Ryan ducked, his movements fluid and controlled. The pipe missed by a mile, and Ryan countered with a strike to Mick's wrist, causing him to drop the weapon. "Stand down, Mick," Ryan warned, his voice low and dangerous. But Mick wasn't ready to give up. Desperate, he grabbed a broken bottle and lunged again, aiming for Jasmine's younger cousin, who had wandered too close to the commotion. Ryan's composure snapped. Seeing Mick threaten an innocent family member ignited a fury he rarely let surface. With lightning speed, he intercepted Mick, locking him in a chokehold and forcing him to drop the weapon. "This ends now," Ryan growled, his voice filled with a quiet rage. Mick struggled, but Ryan's grip was unyielding. Finally, Mick tapped out, gasping for air as Ryan released him and let him collapse to the ground. Sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the arrival of the police. Ryan stood tall, his breathing steady as he watched Mick's defeat sink in. As the authorities arrived to take Mick and his remaining men into custody, Ryan returned to Jasmine. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "You okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ryan nodded, his expression softening as he held her close. "I told you. I'd do whatever it takes to protect you." The guests emerged from the tent, erupting into applause. Jasmine's father clapped Ryan on the back. "You've got my respect, son," he said with a grin. Ryan smiled faintly, his focus still on Jasmine. "Let's finish what we started," he said, taking her hand. As they walked back to the altar, the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the scene. Despite the chaos, love and resilience had prevailed. For Mick and his gang, the day ended in handcuffs and humiliation. For Ryan and Jasmine, it marked the beginning of a future built on strength, unity, and an unshakable bond. The aftermath of the confrontation was both chaotic and cathartic. Flashing red and blue lights reflected off the now calm waters of the lake, casting streaks of color across the once idyllic wedding venue. Police officers swarmed the area, rounding up Mick and the remaining gang members who hadn't fled. Ryan Blake stood apart from the scene, his posture calm but resolute as he watched the arrests unfold. His sharp gaze never left Mick, who was shoved into the back of a police cruiser. Mick, defiant until the end, hurled insults and threats, but his voice cracked under the weight of humiliation. As officers collected statements from shaken guests, the pieces of Mick's twisted motivations began to emerge. Detective Sandra Greer, a seasoned black investigator with an air of quiet authority, approached Ryan for his account. "You kept this from spiraling into something worse," she said, her voice tinged with both respect and gratitude. Ryan nodded, his tone measured. "They came here looking for trouble. Mick had a personal vendetta, against Jasmine, against me. He couldn't stand to see us succeed." The detective flipped through her notebook. "We've had our eye on Mick for a while, petty crimes, harassment, but today, he crossed the line." Ryan's jaw tightened. Hate doesn't just simmer, it burns, and if no one stops it, it spreads. Meanwhile, Jasmine stood near the tent, comforting guests who had yet to shake off the terror of the attack. Her radiant white gown was smeared with dirt, but her presence was still calming and commanding. She hugged her young cousin, who had been closest to Mick's final desperate act, and reassured him with a warm smile. When Ryan finally walked over to Jasmine, the weight of the evening seemed to lift slightly. He placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding them both. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her dark eyes searching his. Ryan gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I am now," he said, pulling her into a tender embrace. Guests began to gather around, offering words of gratitude and admiration. Ryan and Jasmine exchanged glances, their love shining through despite the chaos of the day. "We're stronger together," Jasmine whispered, her voice steady. "They'll never break us." Ryan kissed her forehead. "Never." The media wasted no time picking up the story. By the next day, headlines lauded Ryan's bravery and Jasmine's resilience. Local outlets highlighted how the couple stood as a symbol of unity and justice, inspiring countless others. A news crew visited the venue to capture the aftermath. The bullet casings had been cleared, and the broken chairs had been replaced, but the emotional scars remained visible. Jasmine and Ryan, however, stood in front of the camera as a united front, their message clear. Hate would not win. "This wasn't just about us," Jasmine said during an interview, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "It's about standing up to hatred and showing that love, resilience, and community will always prevail." Ryan nodded, adding, "We weren't going to let fear ruin our day, or our future." Their words resonated far beyond their small town, sparking conversations about the power of love and the importance of confronting prejudice. Back at the police station, Mick sat in a dimly lit interrogation room, his bravado fading under Detective Greer's steady gaze. "You had a choice," she said firmly, leaning across the table. "And you chose hate. But let me tell you something. Hate has a way of destroying the person who wields it." Mick looked away, his expression a mixture of anger and shame. For the first time, the cracks in his facade were visible. "You'll answer for what you've done," Greer continued, her voice unwavering. But it's up to you whether you let that hate consume you completely. Though Mick didn't respond, the silence spoke volumes. The next week, Jasmine and Ryan hosted a smaller gathering at the venue, inviting their guests back to celebrate in a safer and more secure environment. This time, the atmosphere was one of joy and healing. Jasmine, her laughter as radiant as ever, thanked everyone for their support. "You all remind us why love always wins," she said, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. Ryan took the microphone, his demeanor humble but proud. "This isn't just our story. It's everyone's story. We stood together, and that's what matters most." The crowd erupted in applause, their unity a testament to the strength of community. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Ryan and Jasmine shared a private moment near the lake. "This wasn't the day we planned," Jasmine said, her fingers intertwined with Ryan's. Ryan chuckled softly. "No, but it's a day we'll never forget." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the ripples on the water's surface. In that stillness, they found peace, proof that no matter the challenges, their love was unshakable. The air was cool, carrying the scent of fresh rain as the stars began to peek through the dissipating clouds. Despite the chaos earlier in the day, Jasmine and Ryan stood hand in hand at the altar, surrounded by their closest friends and family. String lights draped across the venue cast a warm glow, and the hum of quiet conversation gave way to silence as the ceremony resumed. Jasmine, her radiant smile undimmed by the earlier events, gazed at Ryan with unwavering love. Her flowing white gown, now slightly smudged from the confrontation, seemed even more beautiful against the backdrop of the night sky. Ryan, still in his crisp dress blues, stood tall and composed, his calm demeanor a reminder of the hero he truly was. The crowd, once shaken by fear, now exuded a collective energy of resilience. Guests whispered words of encouragement to Jasmine as she passed, their supportive nods and warm smiles a testament to the power of community. As Jasmine reached the altar, the officiant, who had paused the ceremony during the chaos, welcomed everyone back with a voice steady with emotion. "Tonight, we've been reminded of the strength that love gives us. Ryan and Jasmine, your union symbolizes hope, courage, and the triumph of good over hate." Jasmine turned to Ryan, her voice soft but steady as she began her vows. "Ryan, you've shown me the meaning of strength, not just in how you protect, but in how you love. Today proved once again what I've always known. You are my partner, my anchor, and my safe haven. No matter what comes our way, I choose you." Ryan's eyes glistened as he replied, "Jasmine, you are the strongest person I know. You've taught me to see beauty even in the darkest moments. When I look at you, I see everything I want to protect and everything I want to be. I promise to stand by you, to lift you up, and to love you with every part of me." The vows hung in the air like a sacred promise, met with quiet applause and sniffles from the crowd. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and as Ryan leaned in to kiss Jasmine, cheers erupted. The sound carried into the night, mingling with the rustle of leaves and the gentle lapping of the lake. As the reception began, guests gathered under a canopy of twinkling lights. Tables were adorned with simple yet elegant centerpieces, wildflowers arranged by Jasmine's own hands. The atmosphere was intimate, filled with laughter, music, and the kind of warmth only love can inspire. Ryan, ever the planner, surprised Jasmine with an impromptu speech. Standing beside her with a hand on her waist, he addressed the crowd. "Tonight wasn't what we expected," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But it reminded us why we're here, not just to celebrate love, but to stand together against anything that tries to divide us. Jasmine, you are my inspiration, my strength, and my light. Every challenge we face only makes me more certain that there's nothing we can't overcome together." The crowd erupted in applause, and Jasmine, wiping a tear from her cheek, kissed Ryan, her love for him evident in every glance and touch. The evening culminated with their first dance as husband and wife. A soft melody played as Ryan led Jasmine to the center of the dance floor. Guests circled them, holding sparklers that illuminated the couple in a golden glow. As they swayed to the music, Jasmine rested her head on Ryan's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. In that moment, Everything else faded away. The earlier chaos, the threats, and the fear. All that remained was the love they shared and the unshakable bond they had forged. The night ended not with the fear of what had happened, but with the promise of what lay ahead. Love had triumphed, as it always would. Months have passed since the tumultuous day that marked Jasmine and Ryan's wedding, and life has settled into a rhythm of purpose and joy. The couple's love, forged in the heat of adversity, remains unshakable, radiating strength and unity. Their wedding, once disrupted by hate, is now remembered as a beacon of resilience and the power of community. Jasmine has channeled her experience into creating the Carter Foundation, an organization dedicated to combating hate and promoting understanding. The foundation funds educational programs, supports victims of discrimination, and hosts community events to bridge divides. With every step she takes, Jasmine uses her voice and influence to ensure others find the strength to stand against hatred. Meanwhile, Ryan balances his Navy SEAL duties with mentoring at-risk youth, teaching them discipline, self-respect, and the value of perseverance. His calm demeanor and extraordinary skills inspire trust and admiration, making him a role model for the next generation. In the final scene, Jasmine and Ryan revisit the wedding venue, now a tranquil space that holds both painful and triumphant memories. Hand in hand, they walk the grounds, the soft breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers. "Hard to believe everything that happened here," Jasmine says, her voice a mix of reflection and gratitude. Ryan squeezes her hand gently. "What matters is how we came through it, together." As the sun sets, casting a golden glow across the landscape, Jasmine smiles. "We'll keep standing no matter what." With that promise, they turn to leave, their steps light yet purposeful. Behind them, the venue remains bathed in light, a symbol of the enduring strength and unity they've vowed to uphold, for themselves and for others. After witnessing Jasmine and Ryan's unforgettable journey, what's your takeaway? Share your thoughts in the comments below. How can love and resilience inspire change in today's world? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay connected with more powerful and uplifting stories. Let's keep the conversation alive and inspire a world where love always wins.